Up first, it's Emily Carver with the Carver Palaver, and she's going to tell us why the failing NHS shouldn't be blamed on podgy patients. Start the clock.
Yes, tax, 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 ban, ban, ban. That's the mantra of our public health lobby, isn't it? And they're back again. Former minister under Tony Blair is now advising the government on the NHS, believe it or not. She thinks that the NHS is broken because people are too fat. So what's the solution? Of course, it's to tax the fatties more and more. Tax those sinners. Doesn't matter that the sin taxes are absolutely naffle to help our waistlines. The sugar tax, it was introduced in 2018. What's happened since? Obesity for children and for adults has gone up, believe it or not. It's just another cash grab that hits the poor the most. Yes, we all want people to be healthier, but the NHS isn't broken because people are putting too much into their mouths. It's broken because it's an antiquated system that's badly in need of root and branch reform. So remember, it's not you that is letting the NHS down, it's the NHS that is letting you down.
Nicely done.
There we go, 60 seconds. Darren, what do you think? Do you think that we're, what the sin tax is? Are we scapegoating fat people a little?
Do you know what, Emily? I think you put it really well there, because ultimately I think the people that are most passionate about the NHS staying as it is without any form of reform have to say, well, of course we're going to have to raise more revenue because we need more to get skin taken off people, excess skin and all the rest of it if they've lost loads of weight. Everything is done on the NHS now. And I think a lot of people watching at home will be of the view, I've got an out left for you to tax, you know?
Well, that's true. I mean, we talk about the cost of living, yet the public health lobby are more willing than anyone else to just slap taxes on people who spend more proportionately of their income on food. And yes, we don't all eat healthily.
But look, hang on, let's take smoking, for example. Smoking and cigarettes are very heavily taxed. They have been for a couple of decades now. There was a complete change of direction to discourage people because of just how bad it is for people's health. And we've seen that the number of people that smoke now, it's about 6 million regular smokers. It's a fraction, literally a fraction of what it was a generation ago. And that's because it's too expensive for most people to do.
Alex,
and so doesn't that show that you do that with food and it could follow the same
I don't
route?
think so, because, Alex, isn't the fact that people are smoking less because there's been such a campaign in terms of the health effects? We all know smoking kills us, and also we've had vaping accelerate, have we not?
Right, and actually you make a good point, because what we actually need when it comes to obesity is a proper public health campaign. The dietary advice that people have been given for decades now is terrible. It puts carbohydrates at the top of the food pyramid, saying this should be the majority of your intake. We know that Big Food sponsored a rollout of the low-fat diet, which in fact ended up having extra sugar in a lot of products, which has actually helped perpetuate and create this obesity crisis. The problem is not taxing people who, frankly, the ones who are obese are the ones who actually tend to resort to having to buy ultra-processed food to survive. It's about regulating the big food industry, and they are everywhere. They are pernicious. You know, you had McDonald's sponsoring the Olympic Games during the pandemic. You had Krispy Kreme handing out donuts to NHS staff. These are the people adding to waistlines, and obesity is a massive crisis and a big burden on the NHS.
Albie, do you think we should tax... Sorry, Benjamin. Do you think we should tax big food, as Alex says, or the consumer?
Well, I think you can tax both the consumer and big food by way of a sugar tax. One of the things that the sugar tax did was not just change people's behaviour, but it also made big food companies change the ingredients that were going into their foods that are making people obese. So actually, I think that the sugar tax actually seems to be quite an effective tool at making big businesses change the way that they operate and making people change their food habits.
Yeah, because actually, the real hit here is on the companies, because they know that the price of their products going up makes people less likely to buy it. And so instead of a tax actually being applied to the consumer, what you've seen in loads of examples, I'd put Iron Brew, the most popular fizzy drink in Scotland, as one, is that they reduced the amount of sugar so that the tax wasn't applied. And that works.
But it just tastes terrible. doesn't it? Does no one care about the taste of these foods anymore, Darren?
Well, you know what, though? If sin taxes were proven to work, I reckon that most people here might be saying, all right, well, hunky-dory, happy days, this is the best thing to do. But take Nicola Sturgeon, for example. Remember her? She put in place minimum unit alcohol pricing on alcohol to ban cheap booze, basically, being sold in supermarkets. She's probably in desperate need for a drink right now. But, you know, it didn't work, Emily, did it? Evidence tells us that it didn't work. All it did was make people poorer because people still want a drink, ultimately.
And Albie, you clearly weren't listening to my monologue, my spiel there, were you? Because I said since 2018, which is when the sugar tax came into action, obesity's only gone up. And guess what? The public health lobby, they were the ones who wanted to lock down everyone. Where's the peak in obesity? 2021, because everyone's stuck at home.
No one's arguing that there's a causal relationship between the sugar tax and obesity. People are just arguing that it's a useful tool when it comes to companies changing their recipes and people changing their eating and drinking habits.
Can I just say that, and Alex quite rightly hit upon it, a lot of big companies, whether it's fast food or things we don't even recognise as unhealthy, have put more salt and more sugar in those foods over the last few decades, and it's addictive. You know, I used to eat a lot of McDonald's, and I would notice, if I have a McDonald's once every now and again or something similar, I then crave it because there's clearly the kind of salt and sugar content is addictive in those foods. And that's one of the reasons why companies, pile these foods full of it.
I think a big problem that we actually have is most people don't actually know what they're eating when they're eating it, especially when you're buying foods off the high street. If you're buying one of those sort of, big, milky, sugar-laden drinks from a coffee shop, especially the iced ones in summer, you're talking hundreds and hundreds of calories, but people don't realise they're ingesting those calories because they think, well, it's a drink, it's probably going to be okay. And so I think we need better regulation. It's interesting, isn't it, that the government obesity czar has subsequently stood down saying this government's not doing enough to tackle the crisis, and they're not doing enough because of vested industry interests.
Well, what about personal responsibility? Do we believe in that anymore? If you gorge on junk food, is that not your fault? And it's not the government's job to tell you or to try and tinker with recipes.
When it comes down to personal responsibility, there'll be a lot of people out there now going for a vegan diet thinking, well, this has got to be much better for me. Everyone's saying a plant-based diet is good, but they're actually still ingesting highly processed food full of additives, full of sugars, full of salts. The information is not there for people.
Well, you found the information.
Well, do you know, I was in Wetherspoon, the popular pub chain, the other day, and I went to have the vegan breakfast, or the veggie breakfast, I think it might have been, and it was 100 calories more than the regular one. And I was like, oh, well, hang on, that's not really a healthier option. And so I do think that information, so you've had the traffic light system on various food products in supermarkets.
Which is built on rubbish science, actually. It's actually not built on secure science, and this is a big problem. The science that we've been told, which is good for you, actually isn't.
Right, well, that's all we've got time for on that one.